What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Thursday, October 28th, and we are going to do our Insider Show with Josina Anderson to talk about the trade deadline. You can watch us as always. I don't know if you guys have heard this, podcast listeners, audio listeners. Like if this guy talks about YouTube one more time, I'm going to jump through my earbuds. But we are live. Well, we're not live for this show on YouTube, but we are live on YouTube a lot. Thursdays at 1 p.m. for our pick show, our best bet show with RJ White and Pete Prisco, and special guest, mystery guest shows up early in Friday's show. You can watch it on YouTube and go figure out who it is. And he makes fun of me. We're also live after every Sunday, Monday, and Thursday night show on YouTube. And Ryan Wilson hosts a Tuesday mock draft show at 1 p.m. Eastern that will be live on YouTube. That's a YouTube exclusive if you want the latest on draft information. He, Josh Edwards, and Chris Trapasso break it down. Hit the subscribe button, youtube.com/pick6, and go ahead and hit that little bell for alerts. You'll get alerts when we go live, and you can come hang with us in the chat and make fun of my miserable picks. Joining me to talk about, oh my God, I can't keep plugging YouTube. It's impossible. Josina Anderson joining me to talk about all things, perhaps maybe some Deshaun Watson chatter for the third week in a row, but all things NFL. What's going on, Josina?
Man, first of all, appreciate you welcoming me in and having me on your show. And yes, the Deshaun Watson saga continues, Will.
Oh my goodness. I know it's we are 3 for 3 on these Thursday afternoon insider podcasts talking to Deshaun Watson. But I got to tell you, I mean, it felt like something was going to happen with primarily because after the Panthers' humiliating loss to the Giants, where they scored 3 points, and Matt Rule was having to talk to Joe Brady about like working on a lot of things, and Sam Darnold was under siege again and just looked generally awful. You could tell that a lot of things in Carolina, and I've been saying this for months, that a lot of how Carolina will approach some front office decision-making, some personnel moves, some quarterback decisions in particular, hinges largely on the emotional state of being of owner David Tepper. You score 3 points against the Giants, and all of a sudden Sunday afternoon, 30 minutes after the game, the Panthers are back in on Deshaun Watson. And then by Wednesday, after everyone had a chance to like talk him off the ledge, the Panthers are no longer in on Deshaun Watson. Do you think that they were serious, or was that just sort of a emotional reaction, a visceral reaction to scoring 3 points in a professional football game against a bottom 10 defense?
Well, they were definitely serious from the standpoint that they had made the offer to the Texans before. Mm-hmm. And also, obviously, after Sam Darnold was benched.
Yeah, for PJ Walker. AAF legend, XFL legend, PJ Walker.
Yes, XFL. And through his 7th interception since going 3-0, you would be remiss not to be back in, from a football standpoint, in on the conversations on Deshaun Walker. Now, obviously, for the time being, that has changed. Whether that has to do with people in the building, who disagree with being in on Deshaun at this point, from the standpoint of protecting Sam Darnold's psyche, to what the circumstances are in the conversation with the Houston Texans. I still personally feel, and this is Josina talking, not necessarily. Well, yeah, I mean, it's the inside
Josina talking, not reporting necessarily.
Yes, thank you. Is that I don't know why they're out on those conversations. Yeah. Obviously from the stuff that's not football, I totally get it. At the same time, as I've said to you, Will, and it's not to lessen any of the things that we've been discussing about, but from the standpoint of it will eventually be done. I think Fred Smoot made a really good point on my show. I don't know how many. He said there are 8 billion people on the earth, or whatever it is, however many people there are. I don't know the exact number. But he said there's never been 32 good quarterbacks in the NFL at one time out of all these people on the earth. So he was just really trying to contextualize how hard it is to find a franchise quarterback. And so who do the Panthers play next?
The Panthers play the Falcons in Atlanta on Halloween.
So, Will, answer me this. If they just lost the game that they just lost against the Giants 25-3, and then you come back and you lose against Atlanta this Sunday. Are you going to again sit here and tell me after Sunday with the trade deadline the following Tuesday that you're just going to be like, yes, I'm still with my flagpole all the way in on Sam?
It's tough. And if you're, no. Look, it's tough. I think that there are conflicting interest in the front office and with ownership and in that building in general, as there would be with any franchise that was interested in Deshaun Watson. Miami obviously has conflicting interest levels when it comes to Deshaun Watson, because you point out, the Panthers were very interested in the Deshaun Watson on the football side of things. Well, that's the problem, right? If you could just trade for Deshaun Watson, which the Panthers were trying to do before the news broke this offseason, that without any sort of ramifications, repercussions coming in the form of, pushback from the public, pushback from your fans, pushback from a PR perspective. I mean, like we were talking about this the other day. Does Scott Fowler write a daily, weekly column, eviscerating, does Joe Person write one in the Athletic? Does Scott Fowler write one in the Charlotte Observer, just calling out David Tepper for putting football above, in theory, like morality and all of that? Because I feel like that would probably happen. And, I understand. Look, the Deshaun Watson thing's tough because I just don't think that anybody can trade for him until the off-field issues are settled. And David Tepper, the other thing too, is the Panthers got so impatient when they whiffed on, they couldn't get Wentz. He wouldn't agree to go there. Stafford wouldn't agree to go there. They were out on, and then the Watson stuff happened. The Panthers sort of hit the panic button and traded for Sam Darnold, and then immediately gave him his 5th-year option for next year, which is like $18 million, with an injury guarantee. So he's going to get that money. And it's like, it feels like it's just, I understand it. If Watson's great, go, Watson is great. If he gets cleared, go get him. But I don't know, man, it just feels like the Panthers are reacting too emotionally at this quarterback position.
Well, going back to like Rusty Hardy's press conference, right? And not getting too granular in these cases. And obviously none of us were there. Sure. But you obviously have the accounts, which in and of itself is a form of, testimony, right? So you have to look at it as verbal, but then you have to also go back to, what is the supporting evidence in those cases. And I think that is something that also needs to be highlighted as well. And in some of those cases, there have been, things that have come out, after the fact of such claims being made, that definitely don't support the position that's in the claims. I think, that needs to, just as much as we talk about the claims, we have to talk about the things that don't support the claims. Sure. And that definitely is out there too. I understand, obviously I'm a woman, so I totally get, believe women. I also think as a journalist, we also need to keep it focused on evidence as well. And as I already qualified, yes, someone's account is a form of evidence. It also is bolstered by evidence.
Sure. Well, I think the important thing to note too is that, like the volume of cases that were filed, lawsuits that were filed against Deshaun Watson is so immense that it becomes very easy to, just because, it becomes easy to kind of package them all together as one, like one case against, like it's just like, like 20, it's like these 22 women are saying the same thing, but I do think there's probably a case, there's different incidents that we don't know about, within the single case. So
I think what I'm trying to get at, Will, is, when Roger Goodell went in front of the owners' meetings and he said, we just don't have enough information to put him on the exempt list, right? It's not necessarily just because they don't have enough information. They've been doing their investigations, right? So that also, and I see, that's why I wish I was there, and obviously I'm, reporting from home right now until other things, take place that I need to take care of. But I wish there was some pushback on that. It's like, we don't have enough information. Well, I also think that that's reflective of their discernment of the information that they do have.
Sure.
Because it's not as if that there hasn't been a collection of different things that comprise these claims. So I do think to a certain degree, they're giving you their discernment over what has been presented to this point. And their assessment of what has been presented to this point. However, I also acknowledge that there have been no additional official findings after these, claims have been written, to which they don't want to act in front of. But I do think that I wish that there was more pushback to that portion of what Roger Goodell said, so he could qualify that more, with regards to the status of what the NFL feels like has already been presented.
Yeah. I think if I can interpret what you're saying correctly, is that Roger Goodell said, and here's his quote. He said, "We don't have all the access to that information and pride ourselves on not interfering with it. That process is ongoing." He also said, "We don't feel we have that necessary information to place him on the exempt list." And to your point, I think it would have been nice to know, is Roger Goodell saying the information we have is not enough to put him on the exempt list, or is he saying we don't have enough information? Because those are two very different things. Did the NFL look at the information they had and say, this does not,
but that's what I'm saying. Well, that's what I feel like.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's what he is saying. It has to be, because think about that. There's already so much of it that's public. So right. It can't, but it's almost like no one pushed back on that, because it's like he's saying, well, we don't have enough information. Well, yes, you do, because there's a lot of information that's out there. And matter of fact, obviously Tony Busby has everything that he said that these women have said. Okay. And then Rusty Harden also did his press conference, in which he laid out a lot of text messages and things, that didn't necessarily support those claims as well. Not in all instances, but in various instances. And so with that collection, of evidence, the commissioner then came out and said what he said. So the only gap that he and the NFL can sliver through is just that the Houston Police Department haven't weighed in subsequent to that, nor has the criminal case been, the grand jury hasn't been formed in front of that. But what he should have been pressed on, what is your assessment of what you already know? Because the DA's office, obviously that's a political, that there's politics around that, right? And then with the Houston Police Department, this has been before them for how long? This is what I'm talking about, because the reason why I'm pressing this today is because these are the things that get pressed in my ear too, I do hear frustration with regards to the fact that the media, since you remember when every day we were talking about it every day, and it was like, and we were going through each case, that it's almost like been kind of left, right?
Well, the football season started and the cases haven't had any movement in the judicial system. And so as a result, we sort of leave,
we stopped assessing where it really is, after Rusty Harden's press conference happened. And I do think, and that's one of the things that, I, even as a journalist, want to go back on is, kind of reading everything and stacking it up, because outside of the depositions and a grand jury weighing in on it, what additional evidence is really coming in? I mean, I think the collection of the evidence is there. So it's really a grand jury weighing in on that evidence, right? Mm-hmm. Unless there's something else that comes up that, I'm not aware of, right? And also, what people say in depositions, maybe that could add additional, color or something that they didn't put in their lawsuit. All I'm saying is that if you're, because the contention on the other side has been that, that this has been, for money. And then you have women saying, no, this really happened. And all I'm saying is I'm not making a judgment on that so much as, outside of what is the testimony of what someone says happened, what is the additional evidence that supports that and also goes against that. And I just feel like that should be parsed better. That's all. Well,
and here, the thing that I think is kind of becoming this to that point, and how this is playing out, and how there has been a stagnation of the cases. My sense of it is that the Dolphins and the Panthers, as we noted, would not be willing to trade for Deshaun Watson until they have some sort of settlement or some sort of resolution to the cases. However, Watson's people I think Charles Robinson of Yahoo has mentioned this, is that, and it's been talked about frequently, and it makes sense. It's Watson, Deshaun, and the people around Deshaun do not want. They could settle these cases today. Like they could get the settlement.
Right, but they don't want to sign the non-disclosure
Correct.
agreement.
If they sign the non-disclosure agreement, that means they can't talk to the NFL. That means they can't talk publicly. Deshaun Watson, it's viewed as Deshaun would then be admitting enough guilt, not where he would be in trouble legally, but where the NFL would say, okay, you settled 22 cases. We can't find out what actually happened because we can't talk to anybody because you all signed NDAs. You're suspended for 6 games. And
by the way, Will, let me just look in the camera and say that, okay? That is a huge issue right now, a huge issue. So we potentially could be, if, Mr. Ross holds, on to wanting additional clarity, and the only way a clarity can come at this point right now, unless something else happens that I'm unaware of, comes through a settlement, that we could really be looking at next week at Deshaun Watson still being a Texan after 4 p.m. Eastern on November 2nd.
Well, and if you're Deshaun Watson, you want to play football and you want to get out there, but you are currently being paid and you are not suspended, and you're healthy, and you're going to be traded at some point, because the Texans have acknowledged either,
No. Let me clarify. So right now, there are no commitments to Deshaun Watson, and or has been whatever that he will get traded.
Oh, no. I don't mean that they have said publicly. Yeah, publicly is probably a bad word, but they have. It has been intimated through, it came out. We talked about it last week. The Houston media, suddenly it's like the Texans have decided that they're ready to trade.
I still want to clarify that.
You're saying Deshaun Watson has not been told he will be traded?
This is how I'm going to say it. There have been no guarantees that he will be traded.
Right.
Period.
Okay.
And so, yeah. And no, but that's really important, because what I'm trying to do is, because always, like, when I'm talking, I'm always watching kind of how I word things as I'm filtering through my own, right?
As one does. Yeah.
As one does. And so there's no guarantees that he will be traded. Remember, this whole process is because obviously he requested, the trade, and there is no, my understanding is that there is no pressure to feel like he has to be traded. Any acquisition that you get from a trade is not changing the trajectory of the Texans season this season.
Right.
And so if you miss the deadline in November 2nd and you hold on to Deshaun Watson until March of the new league year, what are we really talking about, Will? So November, December, January, February, March, it's just, and that's not even it, and it's not even really 5 months. It's really, 3 more months. It's really just 3 more months.
Yeah, I guess maybe I should have parsed or phrased what I said better. What I was saying is that I think the Texans will eventually trade him, but there is, if you're Houston, or if you're Deshaun Watson, like, yes, if you're Deshaun, you would love to get traded on Tuesday and go play in Miami, or maybe even go play in Charlotte if they were still interested, but you're not. Because you're not being suspended by the NFL as long as you were on the Texans. I don't believe, as long and those, what I'm saying? Like, they can push the envelope a little bit in trying to secure a settlement that will benefit him from a league punishment perspective. Where the NDA issue, they can push that because they know that they don't have, he doesn't have to be traded right now. The team that wants to trade for him right now is the 1-5 Miami Dolphins, or are they 1-6, whatever they are. 1-6 Miami Dolphins, who can't win football games and are about to give away a top 5 pick to the Philadelphia Eagles, and everybody gets fired. So, I think that's sort of being missed here, is that Deshaun is not in a huge hurry to get traded. And the Texans, as you point out, are not in a huge hurry to trade him. They're not going to take a discount just to get him off the roster by the trade deadline. They stink. They just traded Mark Ingram to the Saints. Like, they're not good. They know they're not good. They're starting Davis Mills and hope to get Tyrod Taylor back. So Like they've
And
been
I know
using it
you
well.
know that, but I feel like even when I tweeted that, like I think just yesterday or what have you, and I was just like, first of all, I'm trying to make people understand because it's like, oh, Miami's the only one at the no trade, and now David Tepper said, like, people need to really understand that this is a high level game of chess.
Yeah.
Okay? That's number one, and people also need to understand that it real because everyone thinks it's like a foregiven conclude, and I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about like
No. That's why we're doing the podcast to explain it to people. It's right. Like, but
right?
like,
Is that
and here's the other
like
thing for the Texans.
yeah.
Well, if you're Houston, right now you have one and a half suitors for Deshaun Watson. If you say, you know what, it's like we can't give you any guarantees on the settlement, et cetera, we're just going to hold on to him. You get in the offseason, things change frequently with teams. Ben Roethlisberger could retire, and suddenly maybe the Steelers are players. The Broncos have long thought that they were going to get Aaron Rodgers and that would just be a freebie, but maybe that doesn't happen and they get in on Deshaun Watson. There are other teams that could open up the possibility of trading for Watson when you get to the offseason. You're not going to,
Or just week to week, Sunday, even just this Sunday. Remember, I told you I still don't think it benefits any move to happen before Sunday because, shoot, I mean, what happens if any one of these, what if, and 3 franchise quarterbacks go down on Sunday, then we're like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, right.
Just after Sam Darnold got benched, and I said it, whatever. We were just like, okay, well, you're because it's just obvious. It makes common sense. It's their due diligence to now consider that. So we don't know what's going to happen this Sunday. And then you look at certain teams and who they're playing, if they suffer losses, that also can change the temperature overnight. Somebody can wake up and be like, whatever. But I do want to say that I feel like the number of suitors is also really more so qualified. I think that there are suitors. I think that there are multiple people from a football standpoint that obviously would want Deshaun. And let me just take the cases away from it. But I think the other qualifying, the big qualifying thing is the price, is the price. And the Texans are adamant about their price and what they've assessed Deshaun Watson to be, from a NFL compensation standpoint, from just like a capitalist standpoint in terms of as a commodity in terms of the way that he's an asset for a team, not, from obviously we know he's a person. But I have, not, as far as my understanding, that's not changing, at least so far,
Right. And the other thing too is that if you're a team that is sending away picks, right, you're sending 3 first-round picks. So if you're the Carolina Panthers, I guess if you're the Dolphins, you're sending San Francisco's pick, and then you're sending picks for the next 3 years, first-round picks, hot, like heavily valued commodities in the NFL economic infrastructure. And if you do that, you are doing so with the belief that you're going to have Deshaun Watson for all 3 of those seasons. And that way you will not be giving away high picks because your team will be good because you have that quarterback. But if the settlement isn't taking, if his legal situation and by default, also his situation with the NFL is not resolved when you make the trade, it's possible that you lose Deshaun Watson for 6 weeks of that. Let's say you trade for him now and he plays the rest of the season for your team and you're the Dolphins and you barely missed the playoffs and you think, all right, we got a great team coming back in 2022. And then he's suspended for the first 6 games of 2022. All of a sudden that would have completely changed the calculus on what you would be sending the Texans because you're losing 6 games of a season of the prime of this quarterback. And so I think it's,
but if that, but to me, that's like such, it's a, I'm trying to keep qualifying my answers in terms of like, football, right? And I understand that that's a big part of it. But, for me, even if I was not Josina and I was a general manager, I would be saying on my head, at some point, obviously, qualifying everyone's feelings and thoughts, right? But at the same time, the truth is, the fact is that at some point that is going to end, right? Sure. And so I think when you weigh that sample size even if it was less like Antonio Brown, who for the
Sure.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers had to miss the first 8 games. And oh, by the way, they went on to win the Super Bowl. At some point, it does end. And so, I know that is difficult, but I also think that you kind of have to weigh let's just say let's just kind of play this out, whatever. Like if you're Stephen Ross, and I'm thinking, I heard, and obviously they have conversations beyond what they hear from Roger Goodell in public. Clearly they do. I know they do, and obviously they do. But even if you're just looking at it from the lens of what Roger Goodell said, there's a lot of information that is already out there. And it's not, so the clarity is not it. So there is a part of it that is discernment over what is already out there. Right. And so then it just becomes what do his peers from the standpoint of society and a jury says about that evidence. Right. That's the last part. And of course that is a little bit of a wild card. Right. But I'd have to ask, Rusty this. Let's just say it played out and it didn't go favorably. What is and I need to understand this, what is really the max of what could what is the worst if you played it out that could happen, right?
Right now with no criminal charges, the worst case scenario is you are going to have to pay whatever a judge determines the amount of money.
No, I'm talking about if HPD comes back.
Right. Well, and exactly, but that's sort of to my point. I think is that if you're Stephen Ross or David Tepper or any owner trading for Deshaun Watson, the forward thinking calculation you have to do from will this guy be suspended by the league? Will this guy be, will there be charges filed? That's the gamble you're taking, and you're gambling it with a bunch of first round picks. So it makes it's just an impossible calculation, which is why the no trade has happened. And it feels like, Josina, we're headed towards maybe he stays on the Texans, but we won't know until, like you say, Sunday's got to play.
All I'm saying is, let's say it was suspended. I was just playing this out all hypothetically, not because I'm assessing, whatever to whoever's side of the case, but let's just playing it out hypothetically. I don't think that he would be at worst. Let's just say at worst it was a year. I don't think it would be a year.
Right.
And then I would have to ask, and I've already said that, ask Rusty if HPD somehow came back with some sort of whatever. Finally, after all this time that it's been out there, finally saying that they found something that hasn't already been found. What's the worst that you think that charge would be? And then what in the state of Texas does that carry? Let's just say, and there's your final point. Okay. And then from there, we talked about this last week, right? Deshaun Watson is 26. So from that standpoint, after that, all the way up until how old is Tom Brady right now?
44.
So from that standpoint, let's just say at worst case, triple worst case, it was 27, 28. So then you ask yourself, from that point
is it worth it for 29 through 40 for 11 years of Watson to go through? Yeah. And no, that's the math you have to do. You have to build out. It's a risk assessment model. You figure out what the worst case is, the best case is, and you make your move. All right, let's take it. We talked lots of Watson. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk some other trades that actually happened around the NFL. So Mark Ingram, it's a big day for Ingrams who wanted trades. I guess Mark Ingram didn't demand a trade, but I would have to assume he's cool with leaving Houston and going to New Orleans, right?
They never wanted to leave New Orleans.
Yeah, that's right. But Big Truss is back with his pal Alvin Kamara now. Was this a case of the Saints sort of looking around and looking at Marlon Mack, looking at these? They wanted to add some veteran running backs. They don't want Alvin Kamara to have 26 carries a game, which he had a few weeks ago. They want him at somewhere between 17 and 22 carries is my general feeling on a weekly average basis. Ideally 19 carries. You don't go above 20. You get him touches in the passing game, and then you can lean on somebody like Ingram, somebody like Marlon Mack in the run game. Was it just a case of, man, we're so familiar with this guy and we know what he brings that this is the best in-season move?
Well, first of all, I never thought they should have broke up.
Yeah.
And even as it was explained to me last night, just couldn't, come to terms, never wanted to leave. But even from the standpoint, I'm just like, sometimes I feel like as a GM or any member who's a part of leadership, you got to know like what's that like magic stick in your locker room, right? And I
Sure.
really feel like that was such a big, part of that. And so whatever it took, and I don't know what he was, but it couldn't have been that much. Like I just think that like, how did you break that up? That should have never been broken up from the first place.
Yeah.
And yes, after Tony, Jones got injured or what have you, we talked about it last week that the Saints being a part of those conversations. But then after we also got off, you and I were talking, I was hearing it's not really. So it sounds like the temperature was even maybe cooler on Marlin, although acknowledging that, conversations took place. So then at that point, I knew that, the Saints weren't going to be in it. And then obviously, voila, but that report gets out there, you know that they're looking, and then, you can follow up and make a deal for another client, you know what I mean? Or a agent can make a deal for their client is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And Mark Ingram only, he signed, the Saints always have cap issues, so that's probably more or less what it was, but they're always up against the cap, and and old Mickey Loomis shakes his bag of magic beans, and somehow they end up like it's 40. He just sprinkles his pixie dust on the salary cap table. And
it's not beans. Well, it's New Orleans beads.
That's right. It's beads. It's magic beads.
Yes, beads. Come on, you're talking about New Orleans.
Good point. You're right. But 3 years, $15 million for with that Ravens contract when Mark Ingram signed, so it's not like it was exorbitant. Do you think that this leads to a flood of Texans trades? Brandon Cooks, tweeted about the bull bleep after the Mark Ingram trade, and very clearly unhappy with the idea that the Texans are shipping out veterans when everybody's trying to win games. Are there more Texans trades coming, perhaps?
Potentially. I personally and transparently obviously try to call Brandon Cooks myself, and
Sure.
as I saw that tweet, and I'm sure he saw the calls or whatever, and I'm sure maybe wasn't the only call, and
I would bet you were not the only call he got after he tweeted
sure,
that he was angry.
right. And I feel like it's one of those things where you have instant frustration, and then you kind of like ooh, and then you see everyone reacting to that. And for the most part, I think we all know of Brandon Cooks to be very composed, and also not to say that he's not a person and doesn't get frustrated or things like that, but not necessarily fire fingers when it comes to Twitter, I would say. And
Right.
so I think that was a real window into the frustration of the impact on the other players when you're in a rebuilding mode who can contribute. Now JJ Watt just got a very great golden ticket out of Houston to go to Arizona, though. I was just talking to some people around him, and obviously going through the shoulder injury and still waiting for after this game to pick a surgery date for to repair his shoulder. But for someone like Brandon, he's just like, damn, well, where's my parachute?
Yeah.
Ingram gets a parachute, JJ Watt gets a parachute, Whitney goes, and it's just like, okay, well, where is mine? And especially since he's been where did he go? From the Patriots to the Rams?
Saints to the Patriots to the Rams to the Texans. Traded 4 times in his career.
I mean, goodness great. And then probably based on his situation doesn't want to stay there. So now you're looking at someone who is a good contributor. And listen, I there's this big Saints fan on my other show, The Crew, who is just dying to get a wide receiver, based on the situation with Michael Thomas right now, that we need to just, continuously, monitor. And that could be a situation where, maybe you should go over there,
Yeah. And look, right. If Brandon Cooks gets traded, the Texans' top wide receiver is Chris Conley, followed quickly by Danny Amendola and Nico Collins, the rookie. It is not a thick and robust depth chart in there. Melvin Ingram, I think, did I dream that, or did Melvin Ingram wants out too already?
That is true. And what my understanding is that, prior to Whitney, maybe the Packers would have been an option. Just heard that this morning. But, Whitney is over there. So now just gotta, feel it out and, go and see what it is. I literally, when I saw that this morning, that's what I heard. And now we're just kind of waiting to see how it will flush out. Obviously, there'll be more information for Melvin Ingram and many other teams, on Sunday. But I tell you, Will, I just want to kind of put this, which I think is an interesting point, and I know it kind of circles back to Deshaun, but after it became more public, or public in general, that the Dolphins were the only team for which there's been a waiver granted to the no trade clause. Just, I think we need to kind of think about, right, even more so what that really did to the Dolphins in terms of their negotiations with the Texans. Just think
Right.
about this, because if you're at a certain level with your compensation, and obviously it will, if it was at the level, a deal would be done.
Yeah.
So now after that becomes public, and it's like, yes, it's true, Miami's the only one with the waiver. Do you think that Chris is on the phone even quicker now with the Texans to raise the offer? Yes or no?
Yeah, if they're the only ones with the waiver.
No,
Yeah.
meaning my point is that they're less likely to raise the price after it became public.
Right. If they know that they are the only team that Deshaun is willing to waive his no trade clause for,
and they might have known that already. But what I'm saying is that the fact that it's public is now that the public is aware of that, I think that also changes the complexion of the talk as far as your willingness to now go. Now that's why, like I said, I knew last night that nothing was going to happen. I went to bed knowing, I was like, there's no way anything's happening today, right?
Right.
And then on top of that, the Josh Rosen component, because you gave up the second rounder in 2019 in the fifth in 2020. That's all people in Miami say, is that they feel like in that instance for Josh that they were bidding against themselves, and how in retrospect how that looks. So with all I'm saying, Will, is with that context, that is even less likely that you're rushing to make this deal. And as we keep ticking closer to the deadline, you see what I'm saying? That's what I'm
for
saying.
sure. And right now the Dolphins draft picks are, they've already given away their first round pick. That's theirs, right? I mean, the other one is the San Francisco pick, and that would presumably be going to Houston, but you don't know exactly where that pick is going to fall. Right now, it looks pretty good, but I agree with that. No trade clause certainly. You don't want to bid against yourself, but you're the only bidder, so you have to kind of.
So why would you go higher after today?
Yeah.
The only way you're going to go higher, Will, is if somebody else enters the fray.
Sure.
How does Chris go higher? How does he go higher?
You can't.
How does he go higher?
Yeah, you can't. You definitely don't offer anymore after that. Okay. Very quickly, since we won't talk until next Thursday and we'll get out of here. But what do we think? How active do you expect Monday and Tuesday to be in the general trade market? I mean, do we think?
Well, nothing compared to the NBA ever, so it's not going to be like that.
No.
I think a few deals could get done potentially here or there. I think that number could also be impacted, obviously, by what happens on Sunday. I still think some of the people that we talked about before are, up for grabs. Now add Melvin Ingram to the mix. I still think, the Broncos have an extra, corner. I still think the Bears have an extra quarterback. I still think, the Texans might, see what they do with Brandon Cooks, see what happens after this game. We talked about the Von Miller situation. And if you hadn't got hurt in that last game, maybe that would even be something that you would be discussing even more, though I don't think that it should inhibit anyone considering, him, especially at this juncture. So, those are the, ones that, I have. I know there are people in my mentions asking me about Allen Robinson and what have you. So I think some of the other names that I would talk about will just kind of, I think that the picture just becomes clear after this Sunday. We'll have a full assessment of what the desperation level is of teams based on their record, and, what their likelihood is of winning, and what the pressure is in their respective cities to make a move.
Yeah, that's a great point, because 7 weeks in, we do have a sense of where people stand. But right now, if you're the Steelers and the Patriots and the Colts, obviously the Chiefs aren't going to be sellers or anything like that. But those first four teams, and then the Broncos, you can throw them in there too. Sunday might go a long way towards letting them know, or week 7 might go a long way toward week 8. Might go a long way towards letting them know, are they contenders? And then in the NFC, the same thing, right? Like the Panthers have been awful, have lost 4 straight games, but they're still just a half a game out of a playoff spot. And so, I think you're not going to just be dumping everybody off, because, knowing that you can still get into the mix. And so there's probably only 5 teams: Jets, Jags, Dolphins, Texans, and Lions, who are just, have to realistically say we are not in the mix. And maybe that number goes up after Sunday. And if it does, maybe we see a little more action on Monday or Tuesday. Going to be a fun trade deadline either way. Josina Anderson, always fun to chat with you. Make sure and check her out on CBS Sports HQ. Well, I don't have the dates in front of me, but you're on there a bunch talking football,
Mm-hmm.
talking
Yeah,
inside stuff.
yeah, whichever.
I
It's
know,
all
right?
good. No
Yeah,
beef.
I just black out and just talk on HQ.
Me
That's
too. No
fine.
worries.
All right, we'll talk to you next week, Josina. Thanks.
Thank you, Will. Bye, guys.